on the East Coast. I would like to welcome you all to this online conference dedicated to Generative AI, the challenge for innovation, the economy and competition, organized by the Autorité de la Concurrence. My name is Benoît Cœuré and I'm the president of the French Competition Authority. Today we are very lucky to welcome Margrethe Vestager, whom everybody knows is the Executive Vice President of the European Commission for a Europe fit for the digital age and competition. That's the full title, and the Commissioner for Competition. Margrethe will do us a favor to open our conference with keynote remarks on commenting on the call for contributions on competition in Gen AI, which the European Commission published a few days ago. After Margrethe has shared her thoughts with us, the event will be divided into 3 sessions. The first session, and the event will be moderated by Elodie Vandenhende, who's the deputy head of our digital division and who's a leading force behind our opinion on Gen AI, which was published last June. The first session will be dedicated to the impact of AI on the economy. We have the honor and pleasure to welcome Professor Daron Acemoglu from MIT. Daron is a leading scholar on economic development, technology, and labor, and the political economy of it. His latest book, Power and Progress, our 1,000-year struggle with over technology and prosperity, was recently published together with Simon Johnson, and Daron will provide us with perspectives on the impact of AI on jobs and on the economy. The second session will be on the competitive dynamics of the sector, which I will introduce with a short presentation of the French Competition Authority's opinion on Gen AI, as published last June. And finally, we are pleased to welcome Charles Gorintin, who's the co-founder and CTO of Alan, a company offering supplementary health insurance in Europe. And Charles will give us his vision on the third and last theme of today's event, which is the future of Gen AI. The conference is live streamed, and the link to the video will be posted on our website if some of the audience wants to watch it afterwards. So Margrethe, thank you very much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for this. Thank you for inviting us for this important discussion. And thank you very, very much for the investment by the French Competition Authority in this crucial subject, because you dedicate resources, time, your amazing mental capacity to think about these things in order to make sure that we are indeed up to speed. It's a pleasure to work with you. So, of course, everything about artificial intelligence is exciting and also, I think, a bit scary. So many political questions are still waiting for an answer. It's really not that we are done yet. We are just at the beginning. And as said, this webinar is an important contribution to keep finding answers and to ask still better questions. To start with, we need to consider the macroeconomic dimension, which Daron Acemoglu's paper analyzes. So let me warm you up a bit for his presentation by discussing a few of the highlights in his paper. I think he offers a very important note of caution on the risk versus the benefits of AI. He suggests that productivity gains from deploying AI may actually turn out to be more modest than first expected, while at the same time he warns against the risk of widening the gap between capital and labor income. Daron's paper also offers a number of suggestions for policymakers, such as progressive taxation or education and training programs for workers to be able to adapt to a new environment, to new demands. Let me add another instrument that I know quite well, and that is competition policy. If AI and related markets, they remain contestable, well, competition will stimulate greater productivity, greater innovation for AI and related sectors. Healthy markets, they will help bring down prices for consumers and in turn help spread the benefits of AI more widely than what would otherwise be the thing. At the same time, we know how quickly these markets are growing and changing, and that tipping points can be reached quite quickly. For a regulator, being able to act fast means being informed early about what is going on so we know what to act upon. And that is why the Commission has already become active in the competition aspects of artificial intelligence. Last year, we started investigating the sector using antitrust and merger tools. And we reach out to the market through a call for contributions to better understand the AI sector as such. Each of these initiatives have improved our understanding of this highly dynamic area. On 19th of September, we published a competition policy brief on these matters, summarizing the results of the call for competition. We've held a workshop and our market investigation. I think it makes interesting reading, and we're happy to share a link later in this chat. So the first point to know is that generative AI is not happening in a vacuum. The field is already dominated by large digital players who might want to leverage their market power in parallel markets, or to use foreclosure strategies to gain unfair advantages. Too much laissez-faire could create the conditions for the markets tipping. I think there are three types of risk that we need to watch out for. First, upstream markets. Bottlenecks, early consolidation of market power can give large digital players control of inputs. Large digital players could also enjoy preferential access to AI's essential components and block competitors from using them. Second, downstream markets, where big tech control the distribution and commercialization of AI applications. It can take many forms. We know them, of course. Exclusivity clauses, self-preferencing, refusal to supply, tying or bundling, non-compete or lock-in strategies. Third, killer or reverse killer acquisitions to stop competition from ever happening at all. I would also put in this category predatory hiring of talents. So foreclose a competitor by hiring basically all of their AI staff. Could also be abusive non-compete clauses. So these risks have led us to have a number of investigations into partnerships in the sector, namely those where big companies set up partnerships with small AI developers. To be clear, these partnerships, they are important. They give AI developers important and needed access to essential components and allow AI systems to be developed in the first place. So in principle, I consider these deals to be pro-competitive. But they can sometimes entrench a market position, especially through exclusivity rights. So of course, we need to keep an eye to ensure fair play. First, can a partnership be scrutinized as a concentration? Under the EU merger regulation, that is only the case if one of the partners obtain a controlling influence over the other. This question was very central to our review of Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI. The partnership was not formally notified, but DG Comp closely scrutinized the situation of control over OpenAI even before the firing and rehiring of OpenAI CEO and before Microsoft got the observer post at OpenAI's board. After detailed consideration, we decided over summer that Microsoft does not control OpenAI. But let me stress that our rules allows us to keep a close eye on the partnerships, and we will continue to monitor if changes are happening. At the same time, OpenAI benefits greatly from the investment it receives from Microsoft. As long as they stay independent and may choose to enter into others or additional partnerships, these investments do not constitute a structural change in the market that could justify a merger review. The second question is whether AI partnerships that actually involve acquisition of control are reviewable, either at the European or the national level. This question is now all the more important following the court's judgment in the Illumina Grail case. As you will know, the judgment invalidated our revised approach to Article 22 referrals. This revised approach was adopted in order to close a jurisdictional gap. Today, highly valued acquisitions of innovative and competitively significant startup companies active in the tech and digital sectors, well, they typically do not meet the turnover thresholds of the EU merger regulation. The court's judgment provide important legal clarification, but the thing is that it does not change the fact that we need to examine these mergers. We are therefore already reflecting on how we can best ensure that sort of sub-threshold deals with a significant competitive impact in Europe can be reviewed in the future. In the short to medium term, it remains possible for member states with jurisdiction under their national laws, as well as for member states without merger control rules, Luxembourg in case, to refer a merger to the Commission. A number of member states have adopted so-called call-in provisions, which allows their national authorities to assess jurisdiction over a case, of course, if the national conditions are fulfilled. And other member states, they would use deal size threshold or market share thresholds, which allow them to review a merger that has little or no revenues yet. For AI, as for other areas, this means the Commission will have to work closely with the national competition authorities of these member states, because otherwise it's not a given that we will have the necessary scrutiny of transaction involving companies whose turnover do not reflect their competitive potential. For example, in the case of the acquisition of certain assets of Inflection by Microsoft, 7 member states submitted the Commission to request to review the case. While all member states decided to withdraw their request following the Illumina Grail judgment, this sequence shows that partnerships and or agreements akin to those entered into by Microsoft and Inflection, well, they may constitute a structural change in the market, and because of that, we should look at it. For competition enforcers, I think it is quite clear what must be done. We must continue to monitor transactions in the AI sector. We must continue to assess our options on how to address new challenges, and we must do this by working together. So, merger control is not the only tool we have in order to do this. where the partnership constitutes, in fact, a merger. The court's Tower case judgment allows member states to carry out an ex post review under antitrust rules. Of course, ex ante reviews under EU or national merger control rules, they are preferable. That provides greater legal certainty, and they are timelier, they are more effective. Furthermore, and in particular in case of partnerships that do not constitute a merger, companies have to play by all competition rules, including, of course, antitrust rules and the rules of the Digital Markets Act. So, to conclude, this is just one piece of the puzzle. Other regulators and legal issues, they remain open and important. From the risk of fraudulent deepfakes to racial and gender discrimination to copyright enforcement and, of course, everything and more in between. And this is yet another area where competition enforcers need to put sort of their advocacy hats on. We must make sure that the full range of AI-related regulations are consistent with the principles of fair competition, level playing field, open and contestable markets. I think that we have only seen a small fraction of what AI can and will do to our economies and to our societies. It's, of course, exciting to watch, but it's even more exciting to take part of. And this is why I think this discussion is important. It's important to engage more and more people. And for my part, indeed, I will be keeping a close eyes on everything AI. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Margrethe. This is a lot of food for thought for us for the rest of our discussion. Before you leave, may I ask you a question which you might feel a little bit philosophical, but which relates to also to the full breadth of your mandate as Executive Vice President. We'll be discussing a lot the economic functioning of AI and economic regulation, but some would argue that we need changes in our societies. We need societal change if we want to reap all the benefits of AI. So, do you think Europe will be ready for that challenge?
Well, it depends on what you mean, because our societal model has developed some of the most inclusive societies on this planet. Some of the most gender balanced, with all its shortcomings on this planet, with open and to a very large degree free educational system, access to health, infrastructure, vibrant press community as well, where we respect people's privacy, we respect the copyright of authors, musicians, people who create. I think this is a wonderful model. And we made the choice very early on to say, well, in our strategies, the starting point is that technology should serve people. So my take on your question would be to say, of course, we should develop our society, but we should use AI in a way and develop AI in a way that enables people to do more, to live fuller lives. Because I think this is what we're good at. I think we would be very, very poor Chinese. It's not for us. We are Europeans, and I think we should remain so by being loyal to the very fact that we have been thriving for still more inclusive societies where people have a fair chance of making it for decade after decade after decade. And I think that should also be our aim with new technology and with AI in particular.
So we can embrace AI without compromising on our values. That's what you're saying.
I think so, but I think it will be challenging for us because sometimes we do not live up to our own values. There's not the same research in women's diseases as there are in men's diseases. There are many people who are faced with racism in Europe. So we really do not have perfect societies. So when we want to use artificial intelligence more and more, we need to make sure that we do not put all our own biases and discrimination and problems into the algorithm. So it will really take an effort on us to make sure that the algorithm do not reproduce the worst sides of our society, but that it helps us in our ambition to create societies that are still more inclusive. And on a rainy day, I wonder if we are on right track. But then on most days, I actually still do think that we make progress.
Thank you for this wonderfully positive conclusion. Thank you so much for being with us. I think we're going to move to the second part of the discussion. I will leave it to Elodie to steer it, but I would like to thank you very much again, Margrethe.
Thank you.
So Elodie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Cœuré. I am Elodie Vandenhende, Deputy Head of the Digital Economy Unit at the Autorité, and I have the honor to moderate today's panel. Our first theme of discussion today is the impact of AI on the economy. According to some studies, although the impact of generative AI is uncertain and conditional on technological advances, this innovation alone could increase US labor productivity by almost 1.5 percentage points per year over a 10-year period after widespread adoption. Professor Acemoglu, I believe you expect a more modest impact. Can you tell us more about your very interesting paper on the simple macroeconomics of AI?
Thank you, Elodie. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be part of this conversation. And yes, I'll briefly summarize my research. And exactly like you said, Elodie, and exactly like Commissioner Vestager mentioned, there's a lot of optimism about AI, in fact, perhaps bordering on hype. And if we indeed can get some productivity growth out of AI, that's going to be great. If you look at industrialized countries over the last 20 years, productivity growth has been pretty anemic. So anything that can lift productivity growth, improve efficiency, and perhaps be more transformative in terms of economic change, I think those things would be very well received. And there is tremendous excitement because some of the advances in generative AI have surprised even insiders in, for example, some of the capabilities of large language models. But there's also a lot of hype building. If you look at what the tech industry is trying to do, is to accelerate the adoption of generative AI, both because it's their product, but also because the faster is the adoption, the more is the amount of data they will have access to. And there's a belief and probably a reality that data is going to be the key currency for success in the competitive marketplace. Relative to the kinds of forecasts that suggest 1.5% productivity growth gains from generative AI or a combination of generative AI or other technologies, my research suggests that things are going to be more modest. In particular, I'll explain why, but my central estimates suggest that total factor productivity, so the sort of the efficiency and technology related component of economic growth, should increase by about 0.5 to 0.6% over 10 years. So about 0.05% growth every year, additional thanks to AI. So much, much smaller, an order of magnitude smaller than estimates that come from consulting companies or the tech industry. Before I explain to you why I arrived to this number, I want to make two broader points, which I'll come back to. One of them I'm going to come back to at the end. I think part of the reason why I am emphasizing these things is because hype is not good. Hype in the United States especially, but around the world, is forcing a lot of companies to overinvest in AI before they know what to do with it. Business leaders in the United States are under tremendous pressure because they hear it from consultants, they hear it from the media, from the tech journalists, from ads, that if they don't invest in AI, they're falling behind their competitors, so they should be all in. What that does is a rush to incorporate AI into many businesses' core competencies before they know what to do, before their organizations are ready, before their workers are ready, and often taking the low road of just automating some tasks, even if they're not ready. This is not a way to get any productivity growth. But in fact, the more pernicious effect of hype is something else. I'm going to argue that there is something wrong with the current direction of AI, that there is indeed good, potentially great gains that one could obtain, not within the next 5-10 years, but probably more slowly, from the right development of AI. And I'll outline how that could be. But if we give in to the hype, then we actually cement the current direction, making us miss this great opportunity. And this is doubly problematic because the current direction doesn't just miss on the productivity gains, but it also increases the dominance of large corporations, multiplies inequality, and creates a variety of other social ills. So there is every reason to be mindful of the hype. And also there is something new here for regulation, and I'll come back to Commissioner Vestager's comments on regulation were very well placed, but I would actually say that the challenge of regulation is deeper because the ambition of regulation should be greater here. Let me first explain very briefly why I end up with a much smaller number. Then I'll explain what I think the real promise is, why we're not getting there, and what we can do about it. First, on why I don't think the current direction is going to get us to huge productivity gains. Right now, if you look at what generative AI, or more broadly even AI and computer vision technologies can do, they are limited to performing certain cognitive tasks, essentially tasks that can be performed in front of a computer in an office, that do not involve a huge social element, and they do not involve much judgment or sort of high-level analysis. So anything that involves interaction with the physical world right now is off the table when it comes to generative AI. So manufacturing, construction, custodial work, all of these things are not possible. One day they may be. Perhaps there will be tremendous advances in generative AI that will then be integrated with robots that will also become much better. And then perhaps generative AI could be a component of some physical work being automated or becoming more productive. That's not going to happen within the next 10 years. Neither the generative AI architecture nor the robots are ready for that. Anything that involves a huge level of social interaction, psychiatry, entertainment, those are not going to be affected by generative AI. Large language models may sound very clever when they write Shakespearean sonnets, but they're not going to be a substitute for human social interaction anytime soon. And finally, things like what we are doing here, high level of analysis and expertise. Again, one day, perhaps that may be possible, but not within the next 10 years, not with the current architecture we have. Once you sort of make these observations, then you're left with essentially about 5% of the economy that can be automated or significantly impacted by AI. And then when you think of the 5% and worry about how quickly this is actually spreading, which is very slow, even with all the hype, and look at the numbers from experimental studies on how productively AI can be used, which is essentially about a 10% or so reduction in costs or 10% or so increase in productivity in the tasks that are impacted, which is not small, but it's not huge either, then you arrive to the kinds of numbers that I'm quoting, which is in the range of 0.5 to 0.6% within 10 years. Not revolutionary, but of course we'll take it. Now, what I want to argue is that this is actually a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity because that small number that I'm quoting is based on mostly automation. Automation has been with us since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and algorithms and machines are going to continue to be substituted for tasks performed by workers previously. But automation is not the only thing that technologies can do. Technologies can also help human workers become more productive, and AI, broadly construed, including generative AI, is an information technology. It's an information technology par excellence, which means that its best used is to provide information to human workers. If we can give much better information to journalists, physicians, carpenters, electricians, manufacturing workers, I think the possibility for productivity growth is much greater. The problem is that that's not where the industry is going. The industry is not going there because large companies have not found a way of monetizing increasing human productivity in the same way that they have a way of monetizing data via digital ads or monetizing automation via software or other tools that they can sell. And their business model in general tries to sideline human workers rather than amplify human workers' capabilities. This is further exacerbated by the fact that ideologically, the US tech industry is preoccupied with artificial general intelligence and increasing the control of the tech elite over the production process, which again is not congruent with the idea that in a decentralized way you should try to increase the productivity of workers. I think the real promise of AI would be when we can make electricians more productive and lab workers more productive. But that requires a very different architecture of AI. In particular, it requires domain expertise and reliability, two things that current AI chatbots and large language models don't have and are not trying to acquire very much at the moment. So what that suggests is that actually the regulatory challenge is more severe because it's not just that we have to deal with competition, it's not just that we have to deal with abuse, market foreclosure, misinformation, deepfakes, and such things, but we may actually need a more prospective regulatory structure, which also takes into account that there are directions of research, directions of innovation that are not being explored, and you want to encourage that. So what that means in my mind is that regulation has to be coupled with an ambitious strategy for AI that encourages experimentation, for example, via a US level federal agency in the United States and perhaps a European agency that is tasked not just with regulation, but also providing encouragement for more positive directions of AI. I'll stop here and I look forward to receive comments and be part of the conversation in the next half hour or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I'll turn to Charles Gorintin as an entrepreneur in the sector. Do you agree with Professor Acemoglu? Is there a hype around AI?
Thank you very much, Professor Acemoglu, for the comments. I have to say that I absolutely disagree with the premise that AI is hyped up for insincere reasons. And I'm saying that as someone who is both like practicing firsthand AI with Alan, where we have 80% of the company that is actually using generative AI tools every week in their work. So we're definitely seeing the impact. But I'm also speaking as a person who is a non-operational co-founder of Mistral AI, which is also a challenger in the AI competition of building foundational models. So one thing that I think is super clear and that you outline well is that like it's slower. It looks slower right now, and for sure, it's a different process that's at an early stage, and everybody is not gonna get the gains right away. But for us, who are practitioners, who are actually building things and already find the value of AI in the things that we are building in software engineering, in marketing, in sales, in customer service, in everything that we do, we are becoming much more proactive thanks to generative AI. And that is today. That is not like tomorrow. That's not in 10 years. It's actually today. And we see that. And we understand that we are a company that's probably at the forefront, which is why I'm saying that it's a diffusion process and it's not going to touch everyone right at the beginning. So ultimately, I think it's underestimating the impact ultimately, and for sure, where you're right is that the impact is going to be quite unevenly distributed. I read your paper. I really like the methodology. I think it has the merit of giving like an estimate, but to me, there's like way too many sources of uncertainty in that model. And so I was ultimately wondering if such model was backtested on the internet, because ultimately you're assuming a fairly static economy. And like in the way we see generative AI impacting our work, we see that like reorganization of labor and reorganization of the world due to new economics, thanks to the advent of generative AI. So, for example, writing code is much, much cheaper than it ever was. And so it's creating new opportunities that obviously are going to be super hard to actually capture in a macroeconomic model. And for this, I totally don't blame you for trying to predict the future. I know it's super hard, and I will never try to do it myself. And on your point on like having the electricians not be more productive, I think today we already see electricians be more productive. In fact, I have personal friends who have like an AI company that gives access to a tool where an electrician can take a picture or take a video of like an electrical panel and know which what is what in the electrical panel, and gives them instructions on how to do things safely. And just this is like a huge impact on the labor of people who are actually quite down the line in the diffusion process. So and ultimately one last thing, and then I will let Benoît Cœuré give his comments. I think that directions of research should absolutely not be the role of regulation. I think that the directions of research are actually like stemming from economic need and places where we can have an impact in the economy, because ultimately that's what makes money. And if we are to direct via regulation the research, I think we're going to have something I think it's going to be a disaster, because it's not going to be the most promising ways to conduct research that are going to be elected. It's going to be the ones that are decided by a regulator, and I think it's not going to be optimal for the economy. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. President Cœuré, would you like to comment?
Well, I mean, I'd be very short, because I mean there is so much to say, and a lot has been said already. No, I just wanted to, after listening to Daron, I wanted to ask two questions, and the first one relates to is about inequality. I mean, even with the relatively modest kind of impact that you're finding, there will be an impact on jobs. You said that business models sideline human workers. That's in your words, right? And so there has to be an impact on the income gap between capital and labor, and also some impact within labor, obviously skilled labor, unskilled labor, and so on. But firstly, between capital owners and workers, and our experience with mitigating the impact of technological shocks to the income gap is not particularly promising. I mean, we've been very bad at mitigating the impact of globalization on income. We've been very bad at mitigating the impact of technical change on income. And so, is there anything in terms of policy? Is there anything that can help mitigate the income impact of AI in a way that does not create the kind of political frustration and political disruption that we've seen coming out of globalization, for instance? I know it's a very difficult question, but it's also very important. And the second question is, I mean, if I listen carefully to your kind of roadmap for the future, and you say, well, the industry doesn't have the right incentives, and so there has to be some countervailing effort by government to invest in good AI, quote unquote, AI for the public good. And that's a relatively kind of modest solution. You're saying we need a little bit more of industrial policy in the right places, and we'll be good. But you could have a more radical conclusion that we need to change more radically some of the institutions the economy is operating in if we want AI to deliver good. And that might be, and the answer might be different in different places, because we have different political institutions in different regions, advanced economies, developing economies, etc. So is there a case for being even more radical than you are, and calling for more radical institutional change if we want AI to succeed?
Well, wonderful, very thought-provoking comments and questions. Thank you, Benoît. Thank you, Charles. Let me take them in reverse order, and then so yes, absolutely, there is a case for being more radical, and I believe the most effective thing for the future would be if the tech industry changed, if its incentives changed, and if its culture changed. But I don't think that there are any simple policies that's going to achieve that. So what that means is that regulatory policies, subsidy schemes, call it industrial policy, call it something else, and taxation policies might be the best tool we have available, especially if they also have the capability to start changing the internal dynamics of the tech industry, which sometimes competition policy and other policies have been seen to do. In terms of inequality, absolutely. I think, especially in the US and to some extent in the UK, but also throughout the industrialized world, our track record of dealing with the inequality consequences of globalization, other automation technologies, etc., aren't good. The good news is that I think AI's inequality effects are going to be slower, again, according to the same sort of forecast that I made. And they're actually not going to be as bad as some of the other technologies for a very simple reason, which is that if you look at, for example, robots, their impact concentrates on a very small group of workers, those that were performing manual works that are low education, more male, younger ages. If you, on the other hand, look at the occupations that AI is going to impact, they're much more widely distributed throughout society. That's why the bigger effect is going to be between capital and labor rather than within group inequality, within labor inequality. But we're also not very good at dealing with capital and labor inequality. Let me say two things about Charles's excellent comments. So, first of all, absolutely, I'm not denying that there are some tasks in which, even right now, productivity gains are present, and computer programming, especially in common languages, is a perfect example I discuss in the paper. Why? Because that's a simple enough task where generative AI architecture is very good. You can take code that already exists in many contexts and you can make some changes to it. And small mistakes don't matter so much because you are dealing with a with somewhat experienced programmers who can then do the debugging if there are some inconsistencies. So there are a number of other occupations like that. My numbers come from the fact that they're not pervasive throughout the economy. Now, if there are more companies like the one that you mentioned about helping electricians, I think that can change. Now, I would love to get the reference for that company because I have spoken to so many people in the US tech industry asking about technologies like this. I have a list from the education sector, from the health sector, from electrical craft work, and I couldn't find any. But I think there's a real problem with these technologies right now. They don't have the data, high quality data, to build expertise, and they don't have reliability. If you're giving a tool to an electrician, reliability is very critical. So I think we need more change in the architecture of these models to actually realize this potential, and we need much more investment, and that's not where the investment is going in the US. Again, I would love to find out about that company. And then finally, should we leave the direction of innovation just to markets and businesses? Well, I think you're making an excellent point. Bureaucrats are not good at it. Businesses might be better. But we know from experience that businesses are not perfect either. If it wasn't for regulations and policies, today we would still be investing just in fossil fuel technologies and gas-guzzling cars, and there wouldn't be solar panels, there wouldn't be better wind technologies, there wouldn't be all of the cost reductions in electricity generation that came from renewables. Why? Because as things stood in the 1990s, 2000s, fossil fuel technologies were much more ahead of others. They were much more profitable. All the fiscal and market incentives were aligned to support them. So it's not that regulators know technology better, but regulators have an opportunity to reflect social calculus in a way that businesses don't always, and even markets don't always. So I think it's the same argument in supporting renewable technologies, taxing carbon emissions, that is at the root of my argument that if we go in the wrong direction in AI, which is going to have very pervasive effects throughout society, and if it increases inequality, if it doesn't deliver in terms of productivity, if it creates disruptive effects, I think its social costs are going to be much higher. And it's the democratic process and regulators that need to have a say in this, in the same way that they need to have a say in climate change related debates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Acemoglu. I think we need to turn to our second topic of discussion, competitive dynamics of the sector. Today, competition in the sector seems intense and the pace of innovation is rapid. Yet the authorities, in its latest opinion, seems to highlight several risks for competition. President Cœuré, can you please let us know in a few minutes what are the main findings of the authorities' opinion in this respect? Thank you.
Thank you, Elodie. I will give you the short version. First, because we're running late on our schedule. Also, because our Executive Vice President Vestager already outlined a number of risks that we see to competition, and there is full agreement, of course, between the French Competition Authority and the Commission. And more broadly, there is a lot of commonality in the global antitrust community on the risks and on what to do about it. And in a way, I'm going to take that discussion where Daron left it. Daron said basically that the industry, in some cases, needs better incentives to, if we want AI to provide the benefits that we expect for society. Antitrust is about providing the right incentives for companies so that innovation is up and running, and so that companies do not appropriate rents that would be given back to the market or given back to consumers. And that's what we do as antitrust regulators. So at the French authority, we decided to have a deeper dive into the functioning of the generative AI industry from the upstream building and designing and training of large language models to the fine-tuning and the deployment of these models and their use by end users. And we also, because we wanted to be short, we focused on the upstream stack of the AI industry, that is on the design and training of large language models. And we didn't dive that much into deployment and consumer protection related issues. And there are three key findings. The first finding is that the AI sector, the AI industry, is characterized by high barriers to entry because training and inferring Gen AI models requires at least 4 essential inputs: chips or compute more generally, cloud services, data, and technical skills, talent. These inputs can be scarce and they can be expensive. And the scale of investments required to train LLMs also creates significant barriers to entry. So first thing is high barriers to entry. Second thing is major players, particularly platforms, gatekeepers, as we call them in Europe, being already active at different levels of the AI stack, and some of them are already holding significant positions on several markets. And the third finding, which really comes as a consequence of the first two, is the number of significant risks to competition in the sector, which the opinion lists and discusses. I can give you 3 examples. First example is the risk that large platforms could control critical inputs for the development of foundation models. And that they may have both the ability and the incentive to restrict access to those inputs and foreclose their competitors or exploit their clients. Second type of risks is associated with the presence of some companies on several markets, and so the ability for them to create conglomerate effects, as we call them in competition economics, and to leverage their presence at some markets and also to cement their ecosystems by deploying AI capacities. And so as a result, we propose a number of recommendations. I'm not going into the details. They're all in the opinion. Competition authorities themselves should remain, of course, vigilant and committed, And here we need a lot of international cooperation. And so the good news here is that we do have this international cooperation. Later this week, I will fly to Rome for a G7 meeting with my colleagues from G7 countries, and a lot of our discussions will be devoted to AI, to competition in AI. We also need to monitor and sometimes investigate partnerships. I think Margrethe Vestager has been very explicit about it. I'm not coming back to it. Particularly partnerships between large digital platforms and small AI providers. And also there are a number of public policy instruments that can be deployed to spur competition. Just to focus on one example we give in the report is access to compute and the possibility for small players, small startups to access public capacity on public supercomputers, maybe at a cost, but then we need to design the right cost structure to allow these smaller firms to access public computing capacity so that they can compete on the global playground, and so that compute is not entirely in the hands of the biggest player. So these are only examples of the concerns, examples of the solution. As I said, the good news is that there is a lot of international coordination on this. There is a lot of commonality between antitrust authorities, antitrust enforcers throughout the OECD and throughout the G7. And so I'm confident that this discussion will be taken forward. The only thing here is that we've got to be as fast as the industry. We've got to, the industry is moving ahead of us. And so the challenge for us bureaucrats is to keep in line with very fast technical changes in the industry. But there is no lack of commitment and there is no lack of resolve. I stop here.
Thank you very much. Professor Acemoglu or Charles Gorintin, do you have any quick remarks, because we're running late and I want to devote some time to our last theme?
I have just a few remarks, unless you want to go, Professor. Okay, I'll go. So first, I definitely agree on the fact that we need an industrial policy and that regulators are important, and that we need to have them have their right place. But on the why of the regulators, especially for competition, I believe the purpose of the Authority for Competition is actually to enhance the innovation. And it would be really hard to argue that right now in the AI field, we are lacking innovation. So I think that's something that should be really important, is how do we keep on having that innovation. And I think that the role of the authority is really to make sure that we keep that pace of innovation, if not increase it. So you were saying, President, that in the AI industry there's a high barrier to entry because of the scale of investment, but that actually doesn't preclude new actors to actually enter that market. And the example that I know very closely is the example of Mistral AI. Mistral AI did not exist in April 2023, and now is among the 5 top players of frontier AI model builders. And I'll get back to it in my remarks afterwards, but I believe that a lot of this is due to the fact that we're working with open research and open source. Open source actually makes it so that external players can enter the market, can have access to gigantic amount of data, without the repository named Common Crawl, it wouldn't have been possible to create such company. And then I think you mentioned that there are some significant risk of to competition, with, for example, the partnerships. I believe that partnerships for smaller AI companies are super important because they actually allow them to reach some distribution they wouldn't have been able to. For example, like the biggest open source platform that is actually ruling the world of AI right now is a company named Hugging Face. That's a French company that started like 7 years ago, and they've been like, they're now the reference platform for AI models, and everybody puts their models on that platform. And if they hadn't had partnerships with Amazon and with the other players, they wouldn't have been able to actually compete and create such a great positioning in that world. So we should be really wary about like trying to remove some partnerships, or like even it's the same for acquisition of small companies by the giants. Is that usually by doing that we destabilize the ecosystem, and we actually are reinforcing the giants rather than protecting the smaller innovators.
Thank you very much. Professor Acemoglu, do you have any remarks very quickly? I can't hear you.
Yes, I'll just say something for 30 seconds. I think what European regulators are doing is really critical, because Europe is ahead of the US in terms of regulation, but there is a bigger burden which comes with that. One is to make sure that that regulation also encourages innovation and company growth within the digital area and AI. And also, I think the more challenging thing, because Europe is ahead of the US, it's not just within Europe cooperation. Europe has to pull the US in its towards its regulatory leadership, and I think that's a very tough task. But I think that's your most important challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're turning to our last theme, which is the future of generative AI. And we have 13 minutes left. So Charles Gorintin, can you let us know what the future of generative AI is going to be in 5 minutes? Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I will try to go really fast, and I won't say again that generative AI is really a transformative opportunity. It's really a global competition with a lot of positive economic side effects, and healthy competition would really bring great consumer surplus at the end. And I think that's what should be the goal. I think like so. We're lamenting that there are giants, but what was written in the Draghi report was that in the past 25 years, we've had those in maybe 35 years, we've had those giants emerge in the US, but they did not emerge in Europe. And in fact, we have been historically more protective of the incumbents rather than like being really pushing new companies to emerge and create a lot more innovation. So it's interesting in generative AI because I think it's not the same case, and Europe has actually something to play in order to build competitiveness. So there are already examples in Europe, like there's Mistral for text, but also there was Stability and now Black Forest Labs for images that are massive businesses that are built on open source in Europe. And so if we started with an apparent disadvantage without giants in Europe, open source actually allows Europe to counter position against the giants and build competitive players quickly with less funding and less support. And so why it works, it's usually because open sourcing is key technology drives a Cambrian explosion of innovation. And usually when you allow people to make money, it makes for a great business because you can take a share of that created economic activity. And so ultimately, I think that well thought out regulation should be protective of open source for this counter positioning. It allows also for better resilience of the markets because, as the saying goes now in the AI industry, is that not your weights, not your model. So basically, if you don't own the deployment of the model that you're using, you're actually not using it. You're not actually owning it. And so I wanted to go very quickly on the different parts of the challenges for the generative AI. And with 5 minutes, I won't have time to go all over. But first, I would talk about regulation. Even with the best intentions, I think that restrictive regulation has tended to benefit incumbents, especially when there's some uncertainty. And for this, I would say that the EU AI Act is actually not good for Europe, not for what's in it, which is actually much better than the previous version, and I think it's quite okay, but because of how it was decided and the time it will take to be there. Basically, we decided on the EU AI Act in 2023, but it will come into full application in 2027. So we're both too early and too late. And if you compare that to the US, you have the executive order from President Biden, which can be overturned like in a second if the market was to move from where it was in 2023. So I think that's a really key thing that we need to keep in mind is the latency of application of regulation does not allow us to actually preempt moves in the industry because we're too slow to actually apply them. If it changed, we would have something a little bit different. Interestingly, last night, SB 1047 got vetoed by Gavin Newsom in California, and I think it's a win for small tech because it protects a little bit more open source. One thing that's absolutely super important for generative AI is creating a valuable ecosystem. And I think that should be the role of the competition regulators. It's about like creating that ecosystem and making funding perennial. In order to build those great companies, those future giants, we need to actually allow to create smaller companies that will then be acquired for some money and that money gets reinvested in the ecosystem. And the more acquisitions that you have and possibly partnerships, the more you're going to be able to build the next generation of companies and aim for the really, really big risky bets. Then another point is on talent. I strongly believe that California is now the center of the tech industry in the world, and not just in the US. And why it overtook New Jersey, it's because of employment at will. Basically, reducing the garden leaves and banning them, which is actually where the FTC is going, is a great step to foster innovation and knowledge sharing because great researchers can go from one innovative company to another and cross-pollinate and create a lot more innovation that way. That's how like companies like Intel got funded and the whole story of the whole history of Silicon Valley. Then there's the question of data. Most of the recent advances have been possible because of the creation of commons in terms of data that are available across the world. So the biggest of the commons is the internet. So basically, there's that thing called common crawl that's available for anyone, which is basically a scraping of all of the internet. The problem is that a lot of people who are rent-seeking content rights owners are trying to fight to gain those rights rather than contribute to the modern great library of knowledge. And I think that authorities could have a really good hand on this. Of course, like those big repositories benefit the giants, but also they benefit the people who start from scratch. So that really fosters innovation. Then there's the whole question of compute, where we will need more and more compute, both for training and for inference. And I believe that for strategic economy of countries, we're going to need data centers, a lot of data centers. And for this, there's going to be a battle of energy. The example of France is quite interesting because France is quite well positioned with the base load of energy from nuclear. And what looks like to be the trend right now is actually to start building more nuclear to fuel the creation of more data centers with decarbonized energy, so as to benefit both from the AI boom and also not to have too much impact on the climate. Yet we need to battle fierce oppositions to building data centers, and it's going to be really key ultimately to have them on European ground, no matter who owns them, because that's going to be a key to strategic autonomy. And then the last point is improving automation. Sorry, in the I can stop here.
No,
I can
just
stop.
you can make your last point.
Yeah, it was going to be around improving in adoption. In order for AI to really show its full potential, we will need to be pushing adoption everywhere in societies in order to accelerate and trump the numbers from Professor Acemoglu. We will need to really be educating everyone in the society. In the generative AI report to President Macron, there was a suggestion to go and get people everywhere in the country to try generative AI for their everyday life. And spending a few hours with that will help them like be more productive in all the tasks that they had. We've seen that already internally at Alan. When we put the technology in the hands of people, it usually turns the detractors into promoters. And now 80% of our team uses AI tools every single week. So again, there's a lot of value in AI. And to conclude, I just want to paraphrase Benjamin Franklin to say that Europe shouldn't give up leadership to buy some ephemeral sovereignty, because it would end up having neither. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President Cœuré, do you have any comments to the future of generative AI or any concluding remarks?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a fascinating discussion, and in fact, I agree with a lot of what Charles just said. I'd just like to make 3 points as a comment and a conclusion. First one, there is a lot of dynamism and competition in the AI industry right now. So we are paid to, as regulators, as enforcers, we are paid to worry about things. So what we want, what not like to see is markets tipping or market freezing, and all the benefits of this fantastic innovation that we're seeing today being reaped by a few companies globally. And the fact is that we've seen that in other areas in the digital economy. So we've learned from experience, and we want to avoid that happening once again. But that's not about saying that the markets are not competitive right now. First thing. Second, open source is a long discussion. Open source is in principle great. It allows for smaller players to build on what bigger players have been delivering and achieving, and that's very good. There is a discussion of open source in our report, and what we say is that first, there are many definitions of open source. It can be disclosure of model weights. It can be disclosure of data. It can be disclosure of the way data has been used to train the model, and so on. Maybe we need a little bit more of transparency on the significance of open source and how it's being used by different players in the industry, and we don't want open source to be abused, that is being used to attract clients, build an ecosystem, and then close the door and start building walls. And that also we've seen in other parts of the industry, so we don't want that to happen in the AI space. And finally, one remark about energy. Charles mentioned energy. That's probably an under-discussed part of the policy discussion on AI today. AI will consume a lot of energy. That might create competition concerns if some players want to integrate vertically and have some kind of privileged access to some energy sources. And that's something we might have to look into at some point in the future. Cheap energy, cheap electricity will be a comparative advantage, and Charles was right to mention it. And as a French citizen and civil servant, I do believe that France has lots of assets and cards to play in that race. But there should also be an attempt to minimize energy and to work on use cases of AI that minimize the energy footprint. I mean, a model where each and every staff in a big company would send a request to its AI bot every 10 seconds. I mean, that's not a sustainable model. So we should be a collective effort also to minimize the energy footprint of this industry, both when training and using LLMs, but also for data centers, which were mentioned by Charles. And finally, antitrust enforcers are very focused on what's going on today in the AI industry, trying to make sure that it remains competitive and fair. But in a way, that's the easiest step to take. And the next step will be to understand how AI is changing all other industries in our economies and what will be the impact of competition in all other industries. And that is education, healthcare, science, and so on and so forth. So a lot of work looking ahead for us. And thank you for that discussion.
Thank you very much, President Cœuré. Professor Acemoglu, do you have any concluding remarks?
Well, I'll just say something for 30 seconds. Thanks very much for that enlightening and very optimistic take, Charles. I think data is key, but the economics of data is much more complicated than perhaps you implied. With AI, I think data is going to become a more important factor of production than land. But right now, if we treated land the same way as we are treating data, it would create the biggest tragedy of the commons. We are not providing any incentives for people to create high quality data. And in fact, I think the tech industry's desire to take data and not pay for it is going to be a real impediment for its own advance. I think it's imperative that data creators, and that includes both people who have created useful data in the past and those, even more importantly, who can create useful domain expertise relevant data for the future, should actually be compensated for it. That would lead to a much more equitable distribution of gains and also to higher quality data. But that means that we actually need to protect both the privacy and the data rights of data creators, and then find clever market solutions so that once these payments have been made, those data can be shared with smaller players as well as big players. But the solution is not to expropriate the people's data left, right, and center, because data is a useful resource. That just won't work. For the industry itself, it would be the industry's own cost if high quality data cannot be produced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much to our participants. The link to the video will be posted on our website if some of the audience wants to watch it afterwards. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Elodie. Thank you, everybody. This was wonderful.
Thank you.